I want you to understand the word ibadah in Arabic, or ubudiyya, the masdar. It includes two things. If I translate them as one of those two things, it's incomplete. It's a limitation of English as opposed to classical Arabic. Classical Arabic combines many concepts at the same time. And so if we just look at a partial translation or partial meaning of the concept, there's confusion left in the mind. The two terms that completely or comprehensively cover all aspects of ibadah or ubudiyah are two things. Those are worship and slavery. They're two terms, worship and slavery. A lot of times we either take worship or we take slavery, but they're two separate things in English, but they're combined in Arabic into the word ibadah and ubudiyah. So when the messenger says, La a'budu ma ta'budun, it doesn't just mean I will not worship. Also, I will not be enslaved to. I will not become a slave of. Very briefly, I'll remind you of the difference between worship and slavery. When Maghrib happened, we worshipped Allah. When Isha comes up, we will worship Allah. But in between the prayers, what are we? Slaves of Allah. When you're sleeping, you're not worshipping, but you're still a slave. When you wake up, when you're driving to work, brushing your teeth, eating your breakfast, parking your car, even if you're not reciting Quran or you're not doing an act of worship, you are still what? A slave. In other words, worship is specific acts. The act of fasting, the act of praying, the act of making hajj, the act of reciting Quran, the act of giving sadaqah. These are acts of worship. But a slave is a slave all the time, whether he does those acts or not. This concept is very powerful. It means we are to live according to how Allah wants us to live, not just in Jum'ah during the khutbah and when the salah is going on. We are enslaved to Allah in between the prayers too. حَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى. And Salat al-Wusta, some commentary says it's between the prayers. Be connected to Allah too. You know what happens a lot of times? People worship Allah, but they still don't act like His slave. Somebody owns a liquor store, comes to the salah for 5 times. He worships Allah, but he's clearly not acting like what? A slave. He's not obeying Allah. And sometimes, because we have these partial English definitions, you know what happens? We think to ourselves, hey, at least I worship Him. At least I worship Him, so my job is done. No, you worshipped Him, but you're still not a abd of Allah. Worship is one part, slavery is the other. Ibadah includes both. Now the Arabs, they had 2 problems. There are 2 problems. They refuse to worship Allah, but you know what the bigger problem is? They refuse to be Allah's slaves. There are 2 problems in this surah. We have to make those problems distinct. When they refuse to bow down only to Allah and get rid of all the idols, what is that a problem of? Worship or slavery? That's a problem of worship. But when they refuse to give the orphan, when they refuse to not kill the baby girl, when they refuse to not feed the poor, when they refuse to not give justice, when they refuse to kill without having right to do so, when they abuse the slave, when they do all of these things, what are they refusing to do? They're refusing to act like Allah's slaves. Being Allah's slave includes you worship Him and you act like His slave. 2 things. So now understand the ayah. La a'budu ma ta'budun. La a'budu, I will not be enslaved to, and I will not worship what you have been worshipping. Now we have to understand, Allah, in this ayah, the messenger is being told to talk about what they worship and what they are slaves of. So what is it that they worship, and what is it that they're slaves of? They're worshippers of idols, false gods. And they are slaves of their own desires. 2 things. They worship the idols, and they are slaves of their own selves, their own hawa, their own nafs. And the messenger says, I refuse to worship your idols, and I refuse to be enslaved to my own desires. I refuse both of those things. I'm never going to. Now, the mushrikun said, he's been rejecting our religion for a decade now almost. Let's give him a compromise, maybe the future. Makkah has become pretty tense, Always this confrontation between the Muslims and the kuffar. Let's make a compromise, life will become better. we're willing to accept your religion for a year, and you accept our religion the next year. And then we'll come back to yours this next year, and we'll all share, in other words, we all share Islam for a season, then we'll all share shirk for a season. And if we compromise, things will get better. There won't be any tension in Makkah anymore. So our future will be better. La a'budu, according to most grammarians, the la on the mudari' actually more than present illustrates the future. In other words, the messenger says, don't have your hopes up. I am not going to. It's never going to happen. I will never, if you're thinking the future is going to be softer on you, I will never worship, and I will refuse to be enslaved to whatever you worship and you are enslaved to. That is never going to happen. Get that out of your head.